Have you ever heard about something that causes kids to become more aggressive? Something that promotes more violence in society? These are all common misconceptions that many people have regarding violent video games. Now, personally, I've played a lot of video games, and many of them have been violent in some regard. But I don't feel like hurting anyone, nor do I fly into fits of rage at the slightest provocation. Uh, Violent video games have many misconceptions surrounding them, and these misconceptions could be cleared or reduced with certain key changes to the gaming industry. Let us now look at some of the main misunderstandings. There are many misconceptions and myths regarding video games that feature violence. For instance, many people believe that video games cause kids to become more aggressive. The idea is that kids tend to imitate the things that they see, and as they see more and more violence, they become desensitized to it and more likely to commit more violent actions. This idea, however, is all but disproved by articles such as Video Game Play, Myths and Benefits, written by Patrick M. Marquet in 2020, in which he states, although the images presented in violent games like Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto might be disturbing, people who play violent video games cooperatively display more helping behavior in the real world than people who play non-violent games. This shows the exact opposite effect, where games are being a positive influence on social conduct. Now, others may claim that violent video games cause more violence in society and cause it to be more dangerous. They believe that as more people are exposed to violence and violent actions, they become more encouraged to perform such actions. This is a misconception, as shown by the author Christopher J. Ferguson in his article, Violent Video Games and Aggression, Causal Relationship or Byproduct of Family Violence and Intrinsic Violence Motivation, which was written in 2008. And he states, in this study, once exposure to family violence was controlled, direct exposure to violent video games did not hold any predictive power regarding the commission of violent crimes. This proves that violent video games do not directly cause people to commit crimes or to be more aggressive. Now that we've discussed these misconceptions, we can now move on to what we should do about them. To overcome these misconceptions, there needs to be changes made to the gaming industry. If labeling for video games was improved, there would be fewer people who bought games with content they were opposed to. And for example, there would be less parents who do not want their children exposed to such violent games, and they would be less outraged. The article Tobacco Imagery in Video Games, Ratings and Gamer Recall, which was written by Susan R. Forsyth and Ruth E. Malone in 2016, states, of the M-rated games, 75% contained verified tobacco content, yet the ESRB only gave 4% a tobacco content descriptor. This was a study that showed that the ESRB rating system, a rating system that focused on the portrayal of drugs and violence in video games, was untrustworthy in their assessments. If the gaming industry wants less confusion and misconception, It needs to improve the rating and labeling systems of these games. This could be done by perhaps implementing harsher penalties for incorrect labeling, or more strict demands for what should be rated. Another way to clear these misconceptions is to change the way games are marketed and advertised. Advertisements for games tend to highlight and exaggerate the violence within their games to draw attention to them. The article, Marketing and Policy Considerations for Violent Video Games, written by Kelly Anders in 1999, states, critics have charged the industry with using violence to sell, even for games with relatively mild content. In the article, Kelly goes on to describe how a recent relatively mild game called Extreme, with a 3 for the first E, advertised their game by showing their characters beat up a random a cappella group. Instead of exaggerations, the gaming industry should advertise games accurately. And if a game is violent, then that should be made immediately apparent. We have just discussed the many misconceptions regarding video games and what we should do to reduce them. In conclusion, violent video games are littered with misconceptions and misunderstandings, and we need to do something about it. We need to convince the gaming industry to improve their labeling and advertisement of games so that people can better understand what games are violent and what they actually do. With these changes, people who were actually sensitive to violence can better protect themselves from it, and other people can learn more about the actual effects of violence in these games. This should, in turn, reduce the misconceptions surrounding these games.